Welcome to another Leading Young podcast. My name is Eric Lyde, and I am really looking forward to the conversation we've got today. This is kind of a special edition of the Leading Young podcast. Obviously, if you've turned on the news recently, you know just everything that's going on in our society and our culture, just kind of recently triggered by the George Floyd incident. And so as I was kind of sitting and I've been thinking a lot, what should I say? What should I do? What can I do? What can I say? How can I help? Just one of the things that one of the best things that maybe all of us could be doing right now is just sit down and have some conversations, gather some people with different perspectives around the table, and use any platform we may have to just kind of host some forums and some conversations. And so that is our goal here today and what we're going to try to do. So I am joined by two good friends. I asked them to join when I was thinking about who should come hang out with me and have this conversation. I thought of Mr. Nick Malone and Zach Nave, and both of them bring different perspectives to this conversation. And so I asked them to come. Nick has been a high school student in a ministry that I have been a part of for he was all 4 years, I think, pretty much, and now moved on into college and stayed still in touch a lot and real close. And so I'm glad he's joined. And Zach, I had the opportunity of he was an intern here at Central, the church I work at, for about a year, and got to know him. And now he has moved on and has his own high school ministry that he is leading in Jacksonville, Illinois. And so I appreciate him joining as well. So guys, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
It's good to be here.
Yeah, congratulations. You've made it.
We've made it.
Yeah, you can check this off your bucket list. The Leading Young podcast. Here you are. But guys, why don't you just real quick, just give kind of everybody listening, watching, just give them an idea who you are, any background information that you want to give them. Nick, I'll let you go first.
All right. First, I just want to say thank you, Eric, for this opportunity and just letting us voice, our thoughts and, our suggestions to this topic. But for me, my name is Nicholas Malone. I grew up in a mixed background, with African-American and white. And so I think for me, being able to see both sides of the controversy, I guess, has been pretty helpful. But for myself, just growing up, just living life really. But yeah, that's me.
Zach, introduce yourself.
Yeah, so as Eric said, my name is Zach Nave, and I am a high school youth pastor here in Jacksonville, Illinois. But when it comes to this topic, I am no expert on racism or social injustice by any means. And growing up, I didn't grow up in a very diverse town. I was thinking about my childhood. Like, I don't remember going to church and seeing an African-American at my church. We were just in the middle of Indiana. So there wasn't a whole lot of Black people in the community that I grew up in. But my first really experience with a diverse community was when my family, we moved to Arizona for a year. And so that was the first time, like, I had a Black friend. And so I had a class with this kid. His name was Isaiah, and he was like my first Black friend. So that was kind of my first experience with the African-American community. But I have a unique perspective when it comes to this conversation because a couple years back, my parents adopted. So we did foster into adoption, and the two kids that we adopted are African-American. So I have two Black siblings. They're 7 and 8 years old, Trinae and Kian. Love them to death. And then also I have the other side of the story with like the cops and how people think about them. Because Sammy, my wife, her dad is a retired state cop. So it seems like a lot of people on this issue are either pro-Black or pro-cops. When in reality, I know that Black people are good. I know that cops are good. So I'm in the middle. I know that both sides mess up, but in the end, both sides are good. And so that's what I guess I kind of bring to the table on this issue.
Yeah, and I think Zach brings up a good point. As we go through this, look, this is none of us are experts. None of us have the answers. We're not going to leave this conversation today solving all the world's problems. But what we are doing, what we are willing to do, is just three people that are willing to sit down and try to talk through some of this. So we're probably going to say something that is wrong. We're going to say something that you probably don't agree with, maybe even. We may say some stuff you do agree with. But I think maybe that if we can put some of that aside, just the worry of will I say something incorrectly, or because there's a lot of us that don't really know what to say right now and how to say it. Mm-hmm. And I don't want us, I think that can keep us from saying things that need to be said sometimes. So as you're listening to this, as you're watching, I guess we ask for grace to just kind we're talking through this live together, and we're working through the issue of racism here together. And so first off, I just kind of want to just to kind of get a basis of how a little bit, because one of the things that I have been learning and really realizing more and more over the last several years, but now more specifically several days, is how different some how an African American male even or female and how like I was raised, specifically involving police. And so, Nick, I'm just curious, like when every parent gives their kid the talk, like, okay, like if you get pulled over, do this, or make sure you do this, don't do this. What advice at all have your parents kind of given you when it comes to interacting with police officers if you were to get pulled over?
I mean, for me, the biggest one is just that I've always been taught is just like respecting them and just understanding that, as long as I don't do anything absurd, I mean, I don't have to really fear. And then also respecting them and realizing like they have a job, and they have a life as well. And then along with that is just obeying them, no matter how outrageous it may seem or whatnot. I mean, just like obey them and to just follow like their orders, I guess, because I mean, they know what they're doing. I don't have any idea with because knocking on wood, I haven't been pulled over yet, so I haven't had to go through any of that. But I strongly feel, especially with the things that happened in the past, I mean, obviously, if I were to be pulled over, having my hands visible at all times and like saying yes sir, no sir, yeah, or yes ma'am, no ma'am, and just doing what they ask. But yeah, that's how I would approach it if I were to be pulled over, or if I were to be approached by a cop for any reason, to just be as relaxed and as calm as possible, and to just be open and inviting of them in that sense.
Well, I think that's interesting. And the reason I ask you that question is because I think it does begin to shape the difference of mindsets that like you have to live with compared to the mindset that maybe I necessarily have to live with. Like I asked another friend, kind of this question. I said, hey, I'm just curious, what did your parents teach you about, being pulled over, whatever. And he said, we were always taught, like you said, do what they say. Never reach for like our wallet, never reach for anything without them knowing. And he had 3 or 4 things, like his parents said, if you're pulled over, you need to do these things. And it hit me that even in that, it's so different of the things that parents need to be concerned with. Because here's my parents, the only thing they've ever told me about being pulled over is just make sure if you get pulled over that you're not blocking traffic. Like make sure you pull over out of the way and get out of the way so that you're not blocking traffic for anything. They never stressed to me, hold my hand, make sure your hands are visible, and not that I shouldn't do that anyways, but it's just that just even that question began to show me how different it really is, the things that, an African American needs to think about during a traffic stop. And I'm worried about, oh gosh, I hope I'm not blocking traffic, or I hope I'm not causing any issues. And, like yourself, the friend that I talked to, they've got a whole nother thing that they're thinking about, that's nothing a part of it. So
Yeah,
uh,
and I guess for
yeah.
me, when it comes to this, like for me, I'm worried about getting out of the ticket, whereas like some black people have to worry about getting out of it alive, and
Mm,
that's just the crazy difference of how white people, or not with all cops, but
mhm.
I don't have to. I've never feared for my life
No.
because, unfortunately, unlike Nick, I've been pulled over a few times.
Yeah.
But in all those situations, I've never had to worry. Oh, I better keep my hands on the wheel, like you said, Eric. Like I don't have to worry if I reach down. Like I don't have to worry that this cop's gonna shoot me or pull me out of the car for doing something that he's suspicious of. Like I don't have to worry about it like say the black community does.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah.
I was thinking back to, we all do kind of dumb stuff in high school. Like we all can think back to stories like, oh, that was really dumb. And I remember, one time, some friends, we were driving around, and in the town we live in, Mount Vernon, there isn't a whole lot to do sometimes. So driving around is like the night activity. And we had been driving around, and I needed to pee. So I got out, and there's like a historical village here in town. And I said, hey, I'm just going to run over there and pee real quick, and then we'll go. Well, they thought it would be funny to leave me while I was gone, peeing. No big deal. I said, "Hi, joke." In my mind, I said, "Joke's on them. I'm going to hide when they come back to get me, and I will be, they won't be able to find me. They'll think I'm gone now." And in the process of this, I was, you know, running around, hiding behind trees, all this different things, and they end up coming back around. I'm like, well, I think they actually did leave me. Like they think I'm gone now. So I started walking back home, and a cop actually pulled up next to me, and we had a conversation on what I was doing. And basically he had said, well, hey, somebody had called saying that somebody was running through backyards and hiding behind trees. They were worried that somebody, was going to be breaking in. I said, well, that was me. But, I kind of explained the situation, and that was that. And, I just think like this week, I thought back for whatever reason, that story popped in my mind. I thought, how different would that have been had I been African American? You know what I mean? Like, I mean, how, or just somebody else that had been doing that, because I guarantee you the benefit of the doubt would not have been given that it was just me and some buddies messing around, and, that was the story. And so, I think that's a good place to kind of start in this conversation of realizing that there really is differences in how we are, how we're taught to come into that.
Yeah, in
Uh,
an
yeah,
everyday, can I jump in real
yeah,
quick?
please.
So in an everyday thing, it's not necessarily just driving, but Sammy shared me the story of this couple, an interracial couple, a black male and a white female, and they've talked and come to the agreements that when they go out on simply going out on a jog, that he doesn't run behind her, so that it doesn't look like a black man is running after a white female. And then when it comes to somebody coming to the door, cops come to the door, she's going to answer the door, not him, because if a black man opens the door and there's a white female in the background, they may be a little bit more suspicious than simply a white female opening the door and seeing that there's a black man inside. So it's not necessarily just driving. There's
Mhm.
profiling and everything. And I know with the Ahmaud Arbery story that was a month or two ago where the video surfaced, he was just simply running through his neighborhood, or I don't know if it was necessarily his neighborhood, but a neighborhood, and people chased him down because they thought that he was breaking into houses
Mhm.
and stuff. So it's crazy. I don't have to worry about that, but people have to prepare and think through stuff that might possibly happen, and that's just kind of a sad truth.
Yeah, and I think that is in having this conversation. I know that there are a lot of white people that are watching what's happening right now, and they look at all these different things, and I know, in for some of them, in the back of their minds, they're thinking, well, how bad is it really? Like, how, like, think of all the things America has. How bad is it really? And I think hearing stories like, like Nick talked about, like you just talked about, we don't realize the things that people are having to do behind the scenes just to live everyday life, because we don't have to have those thoughts. Like we never, I mean, me and my wife have never had that conversation, nor would we ever have that conversation, about who's going to answer the door and all those things. So I'm just curious, obviously this has been going on for this isn't, George Floyd isn't the first case of this. This has happened many times over, specifically the last several years, but obviously been going on for a long time. I'm just curious, what's been going through your mind this past week? Like, what are some of the things that you've been thinking about just as you kind of process through this? Nick, you want to go first?
Yes, I'll go first. I mean, the things that have popped into my mind is one, for me, it's definitely opened up a lot more to me because as I was saying, like to you earlier before this, like I never really was much rooted into, this whole, Black Lives Matter. Like I care for it, but I never really truly like learned about it. And like with this whole quarantine thing and being able to just have more time and to be able to digest it more, that's putting more of a perspective for me and how important this is for injustice and inequality, that it's really important that we shine light on it so that we're able to see the bigger picture. We're able to see what's actually happening to the African American community. And then another thing is just like a few questions that just popped into my mind, like how much longer like will this go on? Because I mean, way before, it's been like literally decades of like inequality and injustice in our country. And then also another question was like, how much longer will it take to listen? And with that, I went to like the videos of George Floyd and then also Eric Gardner. And then for George Floyd, he had to say 9 times he can't breathe. And that just got me to like question, like, whenever parents say something, I've said it 3 times and like, why aren't you still listening to me? Like, that just got me like thinking, like, that just put something on my heart. Like a man saying 9 times that he can't breathe, how much more does he have to say that he can't breathe? Or for Eric Gardner, he said it 11 times that he can't breathe. And correct me if I'm wrong in like those numbers, but I just don't understand how much longer it will take for us as humans to just realize, it's lives at stake. It's lives. I mean, sure, these people committed some sort of crime in what way, but I mean, it doesn't cost their life. It's not like they murdered someone. I'm just those are just the questions on my heart and my mind about how much longer it'll take for all this to change.
Yeah, and for me, it's just been a lot of hurt. Like, and I don't know about you guys, but I watched the full 8 minutes, 9 minutes, however long the video was, and just seeing him suffer and nobody doing anything about it. And I think it's just more than a race thing. It's just humanity. Like we're so hateful. We like God is not in the picture. God is not in the center of anything. It seems like nowadays God has been taken out of it, and this is what has happened because of it. So just a lot of hurt and feeling down about the situation. And I just feel bad for both sides, really, because there's good cops out there. I have friends who are cops, and they're having to go into these situations. They're being profiled as well for hating the Black community, when I know that there are a lot of good cops out there. And then there's the Black African American that have to fear cops and just racism that they face on a daily life. So those are just kind of the things that have gone through my mind. And one of the things that I've thought is that there's always going to be one person that misrepresents the whole. So in this case, the cop that was on George Floyd's neck, he isn't the standard for all cops. He's the one that's misrepresenting the whole. And there's always going to be a white person. There's going to be Christians. There's going to be Christians that are going to misrepresent what real Christians are. And so we just have to realize we have to focus on one situation at a time and not carry that over into everybody, whether it be a Black person or a cop.
Yeah, I mean that idea that a lot of us get penalized for a few of us, and that happens to a lot of us. This past week, yeah, I mean, I think I've unfortunately we've seen these same scenarios play out over and over again, and I think because this time seems to I don't know if because it was the video, we were able to see it, hear it, but but it feels like this time, I don't know if you hate to call it a breaking point, because you would hope that anytime this happens, it's a breaking point to change something. But it feels like that this time people are more willing to listen. That there are people that are there. There's more people having these conversations. There's more people that are wanting to listen. So, in your guys' minds, what are some ways, I guess, that or how should we be listening? What should we be listening to? What are the things kind of around this conversation that maybe specifically white people need to be listening to from our brothers and sisters that are crying out right now for justice?
Yeah, I can go first. So, like just this conversation, this is big. Like people are so quick to go to social media, tweet out their thoughts, go to Facebook, make a post, and then just the comments are just filled with hate, and nothing beneficial comes from it. And I think social media has taken away the art of conversation and people just talking through stuff and working through stuff together. So simply having a Zoom call with three guys, uh, two white guys and a black guy, just hearing different perspectives on the issue, I think that is big. And then, like you said, with this particular incident, I think people are a lot more open to learning about the situation, reading books, watching documentaries, seeing what we've missed, what we haven't been doing. So those are just some of the things that we've been doing better this time, I think,
Yeah.
the situation.
Can I get a repeat of the question?
Yeah, basically, what are the things? I think right now people are more willing to listen. But in your mind, Nick, what are the things that we need to be listening to specifically, or people need to be listening to?
Basically, like Zach was saying, just really, for me, my answer to this is just taking a step back. Not immediately going to social media and just be like, oh man, this is bogus, but digesting and taking in the reality of what's going on, taking in the reality that innocent people are dying over small things. And I think yes, we should definitely listen to what the African Americans have to say, listen to what they have to go through, what they have to feel, and like their pain through everyday life, with the injustice and inequality. And then I just speak on it, speak on what you've heard them say, and just speak how things aren't right. Like standing up for what is right, and putting down the wrongs of our society, and how we're handling these situations. And then another thing is, 100%, I do not stand for the violent protesting and whatnot. But I think there's something valuable that we can take away from it, is that you could, there's a bunch of anger going on from this. There's a bunch of just violence coming from this. And there's some quotes from Martin Luther King. He said, "Violence only creates more social problem than it will solve." And then also, riots are the voice of the unheard. And riots are the voice of the unheard. Going kind of just like dissecting that. What I'm getting from that is that, the African Americans, because they're, or just, I'm going to say the rioters, they're doing these things out of anger, because I'm guessing they're just tired of not being listened to. They're tired of not just being heard. And what they're doing is, totally wrong, tearing up the city that they live in. It's totally wrong. But in a sense, I mean, they're just trying to be heard, and they're not doing it in the right way. Peaceful protesting is 100% the way to do it. But I say just by just realizing the pain and the hurt that they're going through, that's causing them to just get to this breaking point of, just wanting to just tear everything up. I think that's just something we need to be aware of, and just to see more than just, oh, they're just tearing up the city and lighting everything on fire. It's just more than that. It's just like from their pain that is like what's inside them, and they're just like letting it out. But again, I do not condone any of that. That is just what I'm saying on that.
Yeah, and I think that it's kind of like anything. When I have a 4-year-old daughter, and when she wants my attention, she'll say, dad, she'll say dad, kind of calm, or she'll maybe tug on my shirt, or something. Then if I don't answer right away, she'll, dad, and kind of hit me this time, and eventually if I don't answer, she's like, dad, dad, like in my face, like, hey, I want, and I think that a lot of times as a parent, your immediate reaction when that happened is to just immediately be annoyed. You're like, why are you screaming at me? Why are you, grabbing me or hitting me? Like, just say, but in all reality, for 2 or 3 minutes, they've been trying to get your attention, and so I think, that Martin Luther King quote, I've seen a lot recently, and I think there really is something to that, that these are people that, however we want to say it, they've been unheard for a long time. We might give them little bits and pieces of a platform, or give them some time, but in all reality, it's a people that have been unheard, and quite frankly, they've been asked to stay quiet. And when they do speak up, it is, like you look at, kind of Colin Kaepernick, that was somebody that was trying to speak out and was pretty blatantly told to stop, and was really attacked for it. And so I think we have to, if we can't listen, if we're not willing to listen, then I think that really comes to the root of one of the problems. Is if you're not willing to listen, I'm not sure that you really care. If you don't, and some of the things you're going to hear, probably not going to like, but that's because it probably affects the status quo in your life, or how you've always seen things, which, you know, is it's okay. It's just, it's uncomfortable.
Yeah. And can I mention
Yeah.
something on
Yep.
this topic? So like Nick mentioned, I am not for the violent rioting, the looting of that sort. But when it comes to the peaceful protesting, that's something that I personally can get behind. And there's nothing wrong with standing up for what is right. And even you could say that Jesus protested in a sense when he went to the table, when it went to the temple and flipped over the table. He interrupted the flow of the temple and he made people uncomfortable. And I think we don't like protesting as the privileged people because it makes us uncomfortable, but uncomfortable situations bring change. And so just because it doesn't feel right or doesn't feel good to us doesn't mean that it shouldn't be happening or change shouldn't be happening. And so those are just kind of my thoughts when it comes to the protesting.
Yeah. Now I want to, and we've talked a little bit about this, but really, for a lot of us as white people, we're far away from this problem of race. Like I can say that I don't understand racism fully because I never have really had to experience it myself. And I understand that, and I am fully aware of that. So as, somebody who wants to get kind of closer to this situation, somebody that really is far away from it as a white person, what are some ways that, we can get closer to this situation? How can we kind of more immerse ourselves into this? Because, the answer to the problem isn't just to tell people, well, you just need to start doing what the cops say, right? That's not the answer. So how can we as white people begin to get closer to this problem?
You want to go, Nick?
Yeah, I'll go first. Shoot, my opinion for this would just be stepping out of that comfort zone. Like Zach was saying, if there's no, if we're just sitting on our comfort, then no change is going to come. But if we step out of that comfort zone and we address those situations with the African Americans or anyone who's feeling that injustice or inequality, and we just sit like we're doing, sit down and having that conversation with them and understanding what they're going through. I think that's how we obviously can get closer. And I say by, you know, going out to those peaceful protests. I just stopped by for one yesterday, and it was there on Broadway, and it was pretty impactful, and just like the short time I was there. And I think by just going out and by just doing a simple small gesture, that could impact the way you see things in the future for many ways. And then also is just like standing up for what is right, you know, not being not being just in the flow with the wrong that's going on is another reason.
Well, and I think, and that brings up a point. I don't know that, like, Nick, you don't look at me and expect me to go out and fix racism. Like I know that you don't expect that of me alone, or Zach, for me and Zach to go out and solve this problem. But what I think, as two people that, you would call a friend, that we would call you a friend, what you would expect of us is to have your back, and to and to stand beside you, or even behind you, supporting you, if that's what needed to happen. And so I think, whether it's going to a protest, whether protesting is your thing or not, whether it's, what, but I think, that is one thing that I've thought of, is, how I can't fix this on my own. I'm not going to fix it on my own, but I can support, what's happening, and I can have their back. And so I think that is something for us to remember as well.
Yeah, and one thing I would say is we actually need to get to know the people, because we have this profile of how a black male is or a black female is, but we don't know the person. And a quote that really stuck out to me is, we can't base our lens off the headlines. Like, we have all these headlines of, oh, black people are thugs and stuff, but get to know the person, get to know who they are, what they enjoy, and you'll find that you have more in common than you would expect just by the headline or the profile that person carries, just due to their race.
Yeah, I think it's kind of that old, and you hear people talk, as Christians, you hear people talk about this, like, who are you having dinner with? But it really is, if you kind of look at your circle of friends, or just a circle of people that you hang out with, if everybody looks and acts and talks just like you, then odds are you're probably not widening your base to really understand different races and cultures, and things like that. And so I think that's another way.
I think what Zach was talking about, that just reminded me of like this little quote that popped in my head, or not this quote. It was just this statement that, like, I've heard many a times throughout my life. It's, "You're the whitest black person I've ever met." And I mean, sure, yes, I might act different than, the normal black person, but I think that's just something so typical that we do. We just instantly label, African Americans, how they're supposed to act, how they're supposed to talk, how they're supposed to dress, and I think that's one of the problems. We don't get to know the person. We just, judging a book by its cover. And I think that's just something that's, so serious, but yet so easily just overlooked. Is just I don't know, it's just something that just hit me the other day, like, wow, like, I've been judged by being, the whitest black person someone's ever met. Like, my like, I'm African American either way. Like, that doesn't, the way I act doesn't make me less or even more of like an African American. It's just
yeah. So I know in both of you guys, like I said, Zach is a high school pastor. Nick is heavily involved in actually both the church that I work at and the church that Zach works at. And so I know you guys are both Christian men. You're men of God. What in your guys' thoughts? The church sometimes takes a back seat, to a lot of this kind of stuff, just because we don't want to say certain things, or we have to. Basically, there's this conservative Republican mindset that I think sometimes people think the church has to mold and keep, and it's really not the case at all. So what do Christians, what role does the church have in all of this to play in your guys' minds?
Yeah, I can start. So I think the church has a super important role in bringing everybody together. I mean, Revelation 7:9, the end times, it says, "After this I looked, and behold, a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes with palm branches in their hands." And I think that we tend to think that unity means uniformity, but that's not the case at all, because the Bible celebrates diversity. It celebrates people from different nations, different skin colors, different languages coming together and worshiping God. So if it's going to happen in the end times, why don't we start it now? Why are we waiting for the end times for us to be a diverse, unified church? So I think the church has a super important role of going out into the community. I think so often the church says, if you're lost, if you're a sinner, come to us, come to our building and experience God. But I think the church needs to go out in the community, go out to those different neighborhoods that they maybe typically wouldn't have, and get to know the people, meet different students in my case, because I know I'm guilty of just being comfortable and saying, here, students, come to me. Instead of going out, get to know them, getting to know their world, and bringing them closer through those relationships. Because, I mean, you could say all the right things, but if that person knows that you don't care about them, then they don't care what you say. So I think it's important for us to go out, show that we care, show that we are unifying the community, because one person isn't going to end racism. Yep. It's going to take different people in different communities ending it in their different certain community. And then if everybody takes care of their community, it'll take care of itself all across the world.
That was well said. Well said. For me, just something that I just immediately thought of is just by not sweeping these issues under the rug, by addressing them as they are. And I think, Central, they do a great job, by doing work in the community and like all different, ethnicities. I think that is amazing. And I say by, whatever members of the church there are, that are of, different races to have conversations with them, see what we can do as a church in their community to help further, equality and, just a balance to this all. And, just like Zach was saying, by just going out, basically making disciples of all nations, diversity right there. And I say by not shying away from being afraid of saying the wrong thing, because, we're all not perfect. So we're not going to say the right things 100% of the time. Mm-hmm. So I'd say by just starting the conversation, I mean, like Zach was saying, just going out. So, yeah.
Yeah. When I was thinking of, I was thinking of the church's role in this, as I was just thinking about this conversation, and just, I was watching some other churches have, similar kind of conversations, and just really thinking about, all the roles, and, how can the leadership, or how can the church take a leadership role, in this fight against racism. And, I thought of that Martin Luther King quote that, has been shared a lot on social media. I'm sure you've seen it, but it was that in the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. And, I think the first time I probably really saw that quote, I initially thought, well, is silence really like, I don't know what to say. Is silence really that bad? And the more and more I sat with that quote and I thought about that quote, it's just like anything. If you're sitting in a meeting and you don't speak up, people just assume you agree with whatever was decided upon mm-hmm. in the meeting. And so I think, the church has such a role to stand up and to be loud about it. And, like I said, can the church solve, racism on its own? Maybe not, but gosh, that would be a really good start, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's the start there.
Yeah, if the church really got behind this and really said, like, we're going to lead the charge on this, because, God, we don't totally know what maybe Joe Schmo down the street thinks about this, and whether we can change his mind or not, but we know what Jesus thinks about this, and we know what Jesus calls us to do. And so, I just hope that, whether it's from this conversation, whether it's from another conversation that you either have personally or you watch somebody else, and listen to, I would encourage us that hopefully as Christians, we take some ownership in this problem, and that we don't, cheer from the sidelines, root on, say, like, well, we hope it gets better, or I hope this doesn't happen again, because we've kind of seen where that's gotten us. We can keep hoping, but eventually we need to act, and we've got to lead. And so I really hope that the church can rally and step up, because I fully believe this is an issue that Jesus would want to tackle, and he would speak. I mean, he did speak about it. I mean, racism isn't new today. I mean, racism was alive in, the early church, and when Jesus was, whether you were Jew or Gentile, I mean, that racism has existed for a long time. And so I think we have to speak into this as church, take the lead on it, and be places that people can have conversations like this, and be safe places for people to be open and honest and real. And it might not always not come out right, but I think that's important.
Yeah, I agree. And you said we won't always know what the right thing to say is, and silence and all that stuff. But we as the church, we need to come alongside our Black brothers and sisters in Christ and say that we see you, we feel your pain. Because in 1 Corinthians 12:26, if one part suffers, every part suffers with it. So it shouldn't just be something that the Black community has to deal with on their own. We need to be partnering alongside them, hurting as they hurt, and then glorifying God and the good that comes from standing together in the situation.
Absolutely. You guys, any closing thoughts that you want to share, get out there and say?
I guess I can mention one thing. It's kind of off a little bit. And it's not off, but nothing we've really talked about. But you hear the term color blindness. And I'm like, oh, I don't see color. I think people are like, oh, well, I'm not a racist. I don't see color. Well, I see color, and there's nothing wrong with seeing that Nick is a black male. There's nothing wrong with that. And like how I think about it is, when you look at the world and you see all the different colors, that's what makes Earth beautiful. And same thing goes with humanity. It's not that we're all the same. We don't act the same way. We don't look the same way. It's our diversity that makes creation beautiful, and we should celebrate that and not just say, oh, I'm not colorblind, because that's not the goal. We should be seeing color, but seeing that different color as equal.
I love that.
That's some heat. That's some heat. For me, it was just I was on a Zoom call last Friday, and it was just like amongst this worship song. Like I just had this little thing I wrote down just come to my mind. It says, it's time for a change, to stop looking for the race, gender, wealth, or history. Because, I mean, who are we to judge? We all have our history, and we all have our mistakes and flaws. It's 2020. It's time to see the picture. It's time to see the picture clear. Let's see. We must love each other. And we must not only love each other because we're commanded to, but because Jesus, he loved us first. And I think just amongst all this craziness and madness, yes, people make mistakes. People aren't perfect. But, I mean, we have to love each other if we want to come together and make a change.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put a bow on this conversation. I think if you're listening to this and you're a white Christian, or you're even just you're not a Christian, you're a non-believer, it's a really simple question of asking just what does love require of me? And, when we think of our Black brothers and sisters and what they're going through, we can, when we're trying to figure out what to do, what can we say, ask yourself the question, what does love require of me? And that's going to give you a really good start and how you can begin to reach out and ultimately make a change for the better in our world. So, guys, I thank you very much for being willing to take some time out of your afternoon to come and have this conversation. I really appreciate just your openness, your honestness, your willingness to share, and hopefully somebody listen to this and we'll maybe gain some new perspective, maybe begin to see some things differently. I know just through preparing for this conversation and from just having it with you, I know that I have certainly had my eyes opened and things have changed with that. So I appreciate that. As always, you can find more information about Leading Young at leading-young.com. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at leading_young and Facebook at Leading Young Blog. So, Nick, Zach, appreciate you guys hanging out. Prepare for your phones to start blowing up. Autographs,
we're gonna go viral.
paparazzi. Yeah. It's going to be tough for you to go out in public now that you've been on this podcast, but we appreciate you guys doing that. So we signing off. My name is Eric. This has been another Leading Young podcast by Young Leaders for All Leaders. We'll see you soon.